Many Mansions, Chapter 2, Escape. One of Angel's talents is to become invisible. Not that she literally disappears, but so long as she's not acting out and remains very still inside, others simply don't take notice of her. Somehow she just blends in, becoming part of the light and shadows, even when she's moving. So it is that she now lies motionless under the weight of a pile of dirty linens. A normal person would be gasping for air, exceedingly uncomfortable and claustrophobic. Not so for Angel, for she has another talent. She can, at will, shunt her consciousness aside. While remaining aware of her body, it is as though it belongs not to her, but to another. So it is that she has an awareness of the cart's movement down the hall and its slow descent down the service elevator into the cavernous stone-lined vault in the basement. In her mind's eye, she sees all this, as I too see it, even the smallest cracks in the mortar, though her vision is more dreamlike than lucid. Here she will await the dawn of a new day and the revelation of a portal through which she will enter uncharted dimensions of her life. This portal she sees not as a metaphor, but as an immaterial reality. But for the moment, she has shut herself down and set herself adrift upon a sea of dreamless sleep. Nevertheless, I, her imaginary friend, made sure that the last thing she was aware of is my own shimmering likeness, her mirror image, bidding her good night. It really was just too easy. I mean, you'd think someone would have noticed I wasn't in my room and figured out what must have happened. But suddenly it was morning, and the laundry cart was being wheeled up the ramp onto the loading dock, and finally rolled through the open doors of the waiting truck. The door was slammed shut, and after a moment the engine revved, and we were on our way. I immediately clawed my way out from beneath the smelly linen and lowered myself onto the floor of the truck, stretching my painfully cramped legs. The nearest town was Lake Delton, and I assumed that was where we were heading. But I could see nothing whatsoever in the total darkness that enveloped me. I sensed Elena hovering somewhere close by, as though she were teasing me, but so far she hadn't appeared. She can come and go as she pleases, and I sure don't blame her for not wanting to spend the night with me at the bottom of the cart. But I was feeling really alone, and would have appreciated her companionship and guidance. I never have figured out where she goes when she's not with me, and she won't tell. But I assume she must have a life of her own somewhere, and I can't expect her to spend all her time by my side. Anyway, the sense of joy and relief I felt over my newfound freedom was pretty intense. So I had to warn myself not to let down my guard. I was aware somehow that there were some serious adversaries out there who would use any means at their disposal to find me and to force me to return to Pleasant Valley. I have no idea how I knew this. I was, in fact, open to the possibility that I was simply paranoid. In any case, I had a strong sense that I was, for the time being anyway, protected by some sort of invisible shield. I was convinced that somehow I had slipped under the enemy's radar, and that they had no idea where I was. But I figured this could be nothing more than a temporary respite. Sooner or later, they were bound to find me, unless I could somehow manage to stay one step ahead of them. The main thing was I needed to remain focused and aware. As soon as the truck slowed down, I would know we were in town, and then, when we halted at the first stop sign or traffic light, I would quickly open the back doors and slip out. And this is exactly how it happened. Again, I had a sneaking suspicion that it was all too simple, that somehow I was being allowed to escape, like it was some kind of cat and mouse game that was meant to give me a false sense of security. Anyway, the door opened easily, and I was immediately almost blinded by the bright sunlight. I looked from side to side, every nerve in my body tense and ready to spring into action. But as far as I could tell, no one seemed to be paying attention to the laundry truck. So I dropped down onto the surface of the road and quickly scuttled to the sidewalk. Fortunately, there were no other vehicles in sight, and only a few pedestrians. The sun was shining brightly, and so far as I could determine, all was well with the world. But still, I might have succumbed right then and there to that intolerable emptiness that has, for as long as I can remember, been gnawing at the core of my being. And this would have triggered a state of depression akin to that hopeless, contagious despair I had always sensed in my mother. But as soon as I hit the sidewalk, Selena was by my side. Forcing myself to take several deep breaths and willing my heart to stop thumping, I resisted the impulse to run and began walking at a slow, steady pace. We exchanged smiles briefly before looking forward and saying nothing. The last thing we wanted was to draw attention to ourselves. We turned left from the main thoroughfare onto the first side street, which was luckily deserted. "Where to now?" I whispered. But even as I spoke, we were interrupted by the not-so-distant blast of a train whistle. Then I knew for certain, before any words could be exchanged, what would happen next. Sometimes a picture of my immediate future just flashes into my mind, and that's what happened now. It is one of the ways I can manage to stay one step ahead of the enemy. We turned onto a street that I never before set foot on, but everything about it was familiar. And it seemed that my every movement was programmed, like I had no will of my own, but was simply following a script by an unknown author. Or perhaps I was merely a puppet, and an unseen puppeteer was pulling my strings. I shook my head, forcing these troubling thoughts out of my mind. Because after all, if the whole of one's life is predetermined, it is hardly worth living at all. Better to choose eternal darkness than to be compelled against one's will to enter into the light. Where do such thoughts come from, I wondered. Not for the first time in my life. I am, after all, nothing more than a messed up, deeply damaged teenager trying to find her way home. We picked up our pace now, and within several minutes we arrived at the tracks just as the train was slowing down. We followed the embankment down to a sheltered place and waited for our boxcar, then grabbed onto a handle and pulled ourselves through the partially open door. It was dark inside, and the old man was black, wearing a dark suit and a wide-brimmed fedora concealing his eyes, so we did not immediately see him squatting in a corner. Incredibly, he tipped his hat and greeted Selena first. "Welcome aboard, Selena, my child," he said in a voice that was deep and rich and somehow made us feel safe and protected. "And you too are most welcome, my angel," he continued, gracefully rising and honoring us both with a deep bow. It did not occur to me to wonder how it was he knew our names. I was only surprised that he could see my friend.